Hello, good evening, and welcome to the 13th edition of Better AI Meetup. I'm glad you've all come here. As you can see, we are not afraid of any superstitions because we have volume 13 on 13th of November. So I'm glad you all here in one piece and nothing bad ever happened to you, but fingers crossed. And today we'll be talking about one of the places where you definitely don't want anything too bad to happen to you, and that's financial institutions. We'll be having a discussion with financial institutions in Slovakia, with the largest banks and their experience with generative AI, and also with the regulator. But first, we'll be talking about very interesting topics about fine-tuning both LLMs and speech recognition models in AI, and specifically for languages such as Slovak language, which is small, underrepresented in the large data sets. So before we start, I would like to thank our sponsors and the partners that made this possible. That was This AI, the project that's funded from the European Union's Horizon program. And also Kinit, our collaborator, Innovatrix, the spot where this is happening, and Tatra Banka, which will be one of the presenters here as well. So let me start first with Martin Tamajka, the researcher from Kinit. He will be talking about the importance of fine-tuning of LLMs for Slovak languages. So Martin, the floor is yours.
Okay, I can comment the slides, I can see them, and now you can see them as well. Okay, first of all, I'm very glad to be here today again. I think it's my second time at Better AI Meetup, and it's always a pleasure not only to talk to, but also to discuss. And as you will see, I used to be quite annoying towards the audience because I used to ask the questions to the audience, and today it's not an exception, so be prepared and be prepared to be active. Okay, today I'm going to talk about two major things. One of them is why it is important not only to fine-tune, or rather to train large foundation models for specific language, like for instance Slovak. And the second thing I'm going to talk about is the Slovak LLM initiative. So let's start. The GenAI and large language models are definitely of paramount importance for Kinit, and quite a lot of people work on them. And I would like to depict one specific person who is also today in the audience, Andrej, who is the lead of the Slovak LLM initiative. So in the pause, if you have any questions or you would like to discuss any topic that I will mention today, Andrej, me, of course, other people from Kinit are available to you and happy to discuss. I'm sorry, Andrej, to pick you up from the audience. Okay. Let's start with a piece of motivation. And I'm completely sure that you are already set and already heard quite a lot of these two words, the generative AI. And of course, I need to start with it as well. So let's talk about generative AI and large language models. There is no doubt that these things, the GenAI and the LLMs, are a hot topic, and quite rightfully. For us at Kinit, for instance, we are an independent research institute, and for us, the GenAI and LLMs are the subject of research because they are so interesting. It's the models like we never had before. They are so powerful, and research-wise, they are very interesting. But we also have, besides research, we as Kinit have one additional mission, and it is to transfer the results of the research to the industry, to boost the innovation ecosystem. And the good news about GenAI and LLMs is that it's no longer only a topic of research. It already provides some value to the companies. It already provides some value to the innovation ecosystem. So large language models, for instance, like ChatGPT, Llama, or Falcon, or any other sufficiently good language model, have the potential to help in the industry. But as usually, there is a catch. So let's focus on these guys, on large language models, not on GenAI in general. This is the annoying moment. What is the difference between these two groups? Any guess? I can help you. Just shout, I will repeat it. Resources. Okay, what about the resources? Not so much about quality, it's about the amount of the resources. Yes. So the group one is rich or high resource languages, and the second group, unfortunately, Czech, Slovak, LLM, Slovak, belong to the second category. So we belong to the group of so-called limited resource languages. And why does it matter? So let's have a look at an example of one particular open source language model, large language model, which is called Falcon 40 billion. So it's a 40 billion version of this language model. When you look at so-called model card, which on Hugging Face, for instance, describes the properties and some other stuff related to the model, you can see that the model can be used for many different languages. It's multilingual, which means that the model can handle multiple languages. And you can see in detail that it can work with English, German, Spanish, French, and then there are other languages, but there is a catch. And limited capabilities in Italian, Portuguese, Polish, Dutch, Romanian, Czech, and Swedish. No Slovak. Why is that? Why do you think that this model can potentially work with any of these languages, but only with English, German, Spanish, and French it can work properly, otherwise it's limited? What is the reason? This is a hint. So the reason is, of course, the amount of data. And if we look at it in detail, like how much data was used from every single language to train the model, we can see that 75% of the data was in English. So the model saw 750 billion of tokens, something like words, if not completely words, in the training phase, and only the rest was from other languages. So for instance, the other European languages only comprise approximately 7% of the training data, 70 billion. And from that, only 2 billion of tokens were from Czech language, and Slovak is not even listed. So there was probably some Slovak data that sneaked into the training data set, but it was only a tiny fraction. And therefore, the model is better for these 4 languages and has some capabilities for working with the others. So this is kind of nice motivation that also highlights the fact that all languages, all countries can benefit from these exciting technologies in the same amount. And this is a big motivation for us for the initiative Slovak Large Language Model or Slovak LLM. So we started an initiative that aims to somehow fix this issue. So the goal of this initiative is not to create one large language model. It would be cool, but it's not our goal. Why? Because every second day, every second week, okay, let's not exaggerate, every second week there is a new, very cool open source model. So we do not want to only fine-tune one model, but we want to fine-tune or create multiple large language models that would be good for Slovak in general, but also for different setups, like different domains, banking, finances, or medicine, and different tasks. So potentially, we would like to create multiple models that are capable of working with Slovak language in different tasks. And now let's have a look on what we actually need to achieve that. We have multiple ingredients. Ingredient 1, not a surprise, data. So in the Slovak LLM initiative, we would like to gather, clean, curate a big amount of data of different types. General Slovak, but also specific data for different tasks, like sentiment analysis, translation, and different domains. So we could potentially end up with models where one model is good for generic Slovak. So it is then later easier to fine-tune to some Slovak data. Then we can have a specific model that would not even understand Slovak, but also a specific finance vocabulary. Also, the Slovak would understand it to some extent, but maybe this model that was also fine-tuned on some specific banking or finance data will understand it a little bit better. And then it will be a little bit better or a little bit easier fine-tunable to other tasks. So this is ingredient 1. Ingredient 2 is procedure, how to adjust these models. There are quite a lot of different ways how you can fine-tune or train the model, the foundation model, to specific language or specific task. Many of them are computationally extremely expensive, and we would like to create a procedure that is good. And I will show you one very specific way how we would like to do that. So we have the data, we have the procedure, and we could potentially end up here, but I do not believe it is sufficient. So we would also like to have something like this. There is one extra ingredient, and that's a benchmark. Why is it important? Because just imagine that Meta comes tomorrow and releases a model, and they will claim it works perfectly on Slovak. How do you know? Usually, when there is a new model, and especially in the beginning of the GenAI hype, when a new model arrived, you could have read on LinkedIn, on Twitter, that this is the best model, throw away all that was before. And usually it was not true. So the benchmark is a very powerful mechanism how to tell about a new model. So you take the model, you use some of the data for benchmarking, and you just test the model, how good the model it is. And if the model is not sufficiently good on Slovak data on the specific task that you are interested in, you can fine-tune the model. So in the end, we would like to create a reusable pipeline that would help us to take large foundational language model, fine-tune it, and then test it thoroughly from many different viewpoints on different tasks, different domains. And this is the final goal of the Slovak LLM initiative. It has many different flavors. It has many different twists that are not listed here, but this is the main idea. And besides that, there are also a lot of additional ingredients that we need for that. Last but not least, the infrastructure. It's extremely computationally expensive. OK, as I'm running out of time, I would like to skip some of the slides, and I would like to go here. So, long story short, we already performed some initial stage of the Slovak LLM initiative. So we fine-tuned some small models on some Slovak data to get the feeling of what it means to test different techniques, to test different tools, like, for instance, AWS SageMaker, which has quite a steep learning curve, but it's a good tool. And also to get a feeling how much it can actually cost once we run the whole initiative. And also to identify some potential bottlenecks and opportunities. And we did. Let's look at the opportunity, and at one of the opportunities. And if you look at it, we would like to use the fact that Slovak is a specific language, which has pros and major cons. In most cases, when people fine-tune or train foundational models, for instance, you take a multilingual foundational model, you take a big Slovak dataset, what people do is that they fine-tune the model. So they change some weights in the model or add some additional weights. We do not need to go to the details. But the catch is that they usually only fine-tune this part or maybe this part, but usually this part. But why these models perform or may perform worse on languages like Slovak, if they were dominantly trained on English, is here, or maybe here, in the tokenizer, which is usually not trained at all. And why is that? Let's have a look at one particular example. So we took one of the most recent open source models, Llama 3.2, the small version, but it doesn't matter, and we let the model tokenize two words. Tokenization is a procedure where you take the word and you split it into chunks that the model can work with. That's it. So we tokenized the word negativny, which is in Slovak, and the word negative, which is in English. And here you can see that the word negativny was split into 4 different tokens and negative into 1. What are the implications? Just shut it. I know that you know, Jakub. But you are too polite. Costs. This is one of them. And second one is the accuracy. Because the language model, they only generate 1 token at a time. And if you generate more tokens, there is a higher chance to get something wrong. So if you need to generate 4, there is slightly higher chance that it will get wrong. And also the costs. Why the costs? Because you are paying for the output tokens. And if you need to generate 4, it's 4 times more than 1. It's easy. So one of the maybe research sites of the Slovak LLM initiative that may have a big impact on the performance of the models is that we would like to also explore this path, not only the usual path, how the models are fine-tuned, but also this one. Because we can use the properties of, or these properties, I don't know how to call it, of Slovak language and how the models are trained. Good. Very quickly, there are also some challenges. First of all, computational resources. So in the initial phase, we actually combine multiple types of resources. We combined our local infrastructure, mostly for small experiments and for setups and for debugging. And then we fine-tuned some of the models in AWS cloud, which provided us the flexibility. In the future, in the whole Slovak LLM initiative, we would like to utilize the Slovak and potentially also European supercomputers, because they are underutilized from what we know. And this is also an advertisement for you. If you need some decent GPU capacity, we are quite or very happy with using the Slovak supercomputers, so do not hesitate to contact NSCC. It's quite convenient to use. That's just a recommendation for you. OK, and the second challenge is data, but I do not think we need to talk about it much more. And this is the last slide, the future steps. So besides working on the Slovak LLM initiative, or while working on the Slovak LLM initiative, we do not want to work on that on our own, or only on our own, because one of our goals is to connect the community. So we are working together with some partners, and we are going to build on the experience that they got in the initial phase and basically run the Slovak LLM initiative. And the goal is to be able, or the goal is not to have one language model. The goal is to have the pipeline. Is to be able to adapt new models, even those that will only come in the future, to thoroughly test them, and then to offer, for instance, this benchmark to the company so that the companies are able to select the model that would fit their need the most, quite easily. And we would like to have a streamlined pipeline for all of these, for all these steps in the end of the initiative. Good. And that's all I wanted to say, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks for your input. I think it's a good start because we will time and again get to the fact that there are limited resources for Slovak language models. So, and the next presentation will be all about this. So, thanks again, Martin. And as he mentioned, you can contact him and his co-researchers, after we finish. So. Yeah, that's something that that why you come here in person and not online. So yeah, enjoy that. And now I will invite Peter Vyslaj from Tatra Banka, who will be actually talking about similar things from the other perspective, and that's fine-tuning the Whisper model for use in call centers in real-life situations in financial services. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jan, for introducing me. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's honestly a big pleasure to be here. It's my first time at this event, and I'm super excited to tell you something about our activity or project that has been somehow solved or investigated recent months ago. And as Jan said, it's about the fine-tuning the Whisper model for our Slovak call center in Tatra Banka. So in the next minutes, I'd like to cover or introduce you our speech recognition journey at Tatra Banka. I will talk about some specific challenges in Slovak speech recognition, especially focused on transcribing Slovak call center speech. And of course, I will describe our used data and fine-tuning approach. And of course, we will talk about the results. And I'd like to, at the end of the presentation, give you some takeaways for you. Okay, so let me explain our motivation, why we are here. So as you may know, Tatra Banka has a huge call center that somehow generates tons of data on daily basis with some records and metadata. And this data potentially stores some great business value. But unfortunately, there is no such automatic process nowadays that would somehow automatically take these recordings and in some way automatically transcribe to textual form that is somehow usable for getting some valuable insights from the data or doing some interesting use cases or doing some analytics as you may see on this mind map. So most of these use cases are somehow focused on call center analytics or collection analytics when we are talking about some collection process that the operators need to fill manually some wrap-ups or do some quality management or assurance and so on. And that's the main reason. So it's been a while that we are looking for a well-performing speech recognition system that is able to accurately transcribe these call center recordings. The topic of artificial intelligence and speech recognition, it's not a new thing for Tatra Banka. Of course, it's been a long time ago that we started to work on such use cases. Maybe the first one was somewhere in 2019 when we started to kick off some RFP processes or some vendor competitions that were focused on looking for this good performing recognition system or solution that we could potentially use in our call center. But as you can see, this timeline is quite long term, and till now there is no success, or we haven't found such solution in the local vendor palette that would be appropriately able to transcribe these recordings in some business perspective or in some acceptance way. As you can see, somewhere in the last year, we started in parallel with these activities our internal research on a Whisper model. So we were investigating its features and some basic performance on our internal data. And this activity resulted in this way, in this year, in summer, in some intensive research that was focused on Whisper fine-tuning, and I'm going to talk about that in detail later. And yeah, of course, nobody knows what will happen in the next year, but based on these events and some experiences, we know that we would like to strongly focus on this internal research and think about some maybe in-house development and things related to this fine-tuning process. Maybe you are asking yourself that why it is taking so much time, why this is so difficult or hard. As a colleague was talking about some challenges specific for the Slavic category of languages, especially for Slovak. So it's very common that our Slovak language poses much more challenges in contrast with, for example, English or German or Swedish and so on. The reason is, as colleague said previously, the language itself. So the Slovak falls into the family of low-resource languages because we have a very large vocabulary, and the language is very reflective, so it has many forms and so on. And together with it, there comes the acoustics of the task or the environment. So as we know, the call center telephones or the call center speech is done by telephone channel, and the bandwidth of this channel is really narrow, and of course the environment that clients, our customers, are present in them when they are calling the call center is often very noisy, or there is some degradation because of the mobile phones and so on. And at third, the reason or the third challenge is the group of speakers themselves. So we know that in the group of these speakers or the customers, there is a lot of speakers, so the variability of them is really high, and this is a really challenging thing because we can't maybe cover all of the voice features or the characteristics, and moreover, there are some speech disorders often present in the client's speech and some local accents or dialects. And at the end, this is the speech style itself. So all of us have some unique speech style, its speech rate, and some conditions that we are producing the speech. And this is really a unique thing that and finally it has some impact to the performance of the task. So if we put together these three aspects, we can conclude that the recognition of this call center speech is really a challenging task, especially for Slovak language. Okay, so let's have a look to the Whisper model that was released, I think, exactly 2 years ago by OpenAI. It's, I think, well known, and it is well known due to its flexibility and performance and the accuracy. And it's still, I think, the state-of-the-art speech recognition model in the market. And it's really interesting, as was said in the previous presentation, that this Whisper model, the latest version, was trained on very, very large amount of training recordings, and it has to be said that the proportion or the friction of the Slovak language within this amount was really, really small. So I think it was up to 100 hours, so it's very, very small. But nevertheless, the Whisper model can still quite good perform with the Slovak language, but at the condition when the input is really good at quality. Not noisy and not degraded. The Whisper models comes to the market in different sizes or checkpoints, as you can see in the table. So I just wanted to mention there that we were fully focused on the large model in our experiments because it's I think the best performing from this list of publicly available models. There are some available benchmarks as well that especially focuses on list of languages and uses different validation data sets and also including Slovak language. And as you can see, the claimed word error rates are varying from a range of from 15 to 25%. So let's see later if we are really falling into the range of these numbers. I wanted to also mention that there are some real-world or production applications of Whisper model that is able to very accurately transcribe the specific recordings. So there are some use cases, but maybe the third one is or was very interesting for me, where they are using the Whisper model to transcribe the podcasts. But it has to be mentioned that, of course, usually the podcasts are recorded in some studio conditions, and of course this input is of very good quality, and we can in parallel expect very good results, but this is not our case. Okay, so let's have a look to the principle or to the general principle of the fine-tuning, concretely tailored for the Whisper model. So basically it consists of three or two steps, because the first one was done in OpenAI, where they pre-trained for us the publicly available model. And what we have done, we use this large Whisper model, and with using some small annotated sample of our in-domain internal specific data from this call center. I will talk about them later. And we, in an appropriate way, somehow affected the parameters or changed the weights of the model. And in that way, we obtained the fine-tuned model that is able to infer or to do the inference on some real-world customer data from the call center. And currently, there is an activity internally that we are somehow assessing the quality of the transcripts achieved by this Whisper model on real world, not just experimental data. Of course, as it is common in machine learning tasks, also this is can be applied to the fine-tuning process itself. So there are some benefits and challenges, and we need to put them to the weight and decide if it is meaningful for me to start this activity, or if I have enough time or resources and so on. Maybe from the benefits, I'd like to mention the ability to adapt the model to your specific data from your use case or from your task that you want to solve. And from the challenges, I would pick up the possibility or risk of overwriting the pre-trained language, knowledge of the model. So this is not wanted. We want to do the fine-tuning in the way that we like to, of course, preserve the pre-trained knowledge and, of course, add some added value or some part of knowledge that is somehow represented by the data that you are putting to this process. And if you are asking that, okay, what is the recipe of doing such fine-tuning? So basically, you need four key elements or things, and of course, you need the internal labeled data, especially from your domain, that you want to finish the task. You need some people that have the knowledge to do that. Of course, you need some computational resources and infrastructure, and you need to have a time and be patient. Okay, let me tell you something about our internal data in numbers, that what data we used. So basically, we used approximately 50 hours of internal manually annotated speech data or recordings that were approximately split to training and evaluation set in a ratio of 1:1. And this data was represented by 250 dialogues between the agents and the customers. And this was represented by approximately 220 unique voices of the customers and agents in the distribution, as you can see on this cake graph. Maybe I'd like to mention an interesting fact that recently we repeatedly started to generate a new annotated data by two new trained annotators that are generating or that are manually transcribing the recordings for these special purposes. And they look like as follows. So they are using a specified tool that we are feeding with the prepared data. So we have a methodology that we use the call center data and we transcribe them to text that, of course, contains some errors. And these annotators are basically correcting these pre-transcribed information to the correct form, and additionally, they are adding some manually adding some predefined markers and metadata or tags and whatever that is needed. Maybe I'd like to mention some interesting facts. So from our statistic, it's obvious that this trained annotator currently in these days, it's a recent number, are able to generate or manually transcribe 7 minutes of pure speech within 1 hour of focused work. So you can see that it's really time-consuming process or task, and it's really hard and strong for focusing. So they are specially trained to have some rests and breaks and do some maybe exercise between it and so on to have correct data. Okay, maybe a few words about our resources that we used for the computations. We have employed 2 performant graphical cards, as you can see, and we needed for some efficient work hundreds of gigabytes of disk space because these things take a lot of space. And maybe just to mention an interesting fact that the training used to take, of course, in a context of some settings and parameters from 6 to 70 hours, so it's quite a time-consuming operation. It has to be said that all these things and stuff was run strictly on internal resources because of the extremely sensitive nature of the information. So all of these recordings are biometric data, and we can't put them to cloud or even to some external point where we could potentially run these experiments. Okay, so let's have now some kind of deep dive into our fine-tuning approach. So basically, we used 2 approaches that are now publicly available. One of them is very recent. And we somehow merged them together and adopted to our purposes. And this adoption was basically focused on the data structure preparation and adopting to our maybe needs or structure of the data that we have currently. Regarding the data preprocessing, as it's very common and usual in most of the machine learning tasks oriented on on these topics, we can say that we used, of course, our training data that was cut to some microsegments, and of course in parallel with our transcripts. And after that, the speech data was represented into the form of mel-based feature vectors, and using the data collator, we were able to prepare the tensors for the training itself. And the training consisted of from the process that we used the standard Hugging Face trainer or sequence-to-sequence trainer, and also the input was, of course, the pre-trained checkpoint of the Whisper large V3 model. And with using proper configuration, we were able to fine-tune this pre-trained model in the form of our new form of fine-tuned model that we started to evaluate within an inference task. And it just needs to be said that all of the pre-processing things were very similar or identical with those ones that are required in the training phase. And using the decoding that was represented with the Whisper for conditional generation function, we were able to generate the sequences or the text or the transcripts, and these transcripts were evaluated in the experiments. For the evaluation, we used basically two approaches. It is also common. There was a subjective or human evaluation that our colleagues made some qualitative assessment and evaluation of real-world transcripts and recordings. So they were assessing the quality in the sense that if I see some progress maybe in the comparison with the previous solutions or transcripts or versions of the model. And the second one was the objective evaluation that we used the word error rate matrix for. It's very common in this recognition task, so I'm not going to talk about it in detail. It just needs to be said that this word error rate is quite a strict metric, but is good for experimental evaluation because you can in a very nice way track your progress. So it's maybe not very useful for some subjective evaluation, but it was great for this objective one. Maybe just an interesting fact. So far we performed approximately 300 evaluations within this framework so far, and we are still working further. Okay, so let's have a look at the main results. Basically, as it is usual when you are starting some new experiments, so we wanted to just check that how these pre-trained and publicly available models are performing with our internal data. So we just were looking for the answer that what is the initial error rate with our data. And as you can see, we have done 4 experiments with these 4 models that we have chosen. And we were quite surprised that okay, it was expected that the large V3, the recent version, will maybe perform in the best way, but we were quite surprised from these numbers that it was quite high, this word error rate. So it was around 47%. So it was maybe another motivation factor to finally decide that, okay, we are going to do this fine-tuning. Okay, so let me present the results from this fine-tuned model. So using some pipeline and some set of models that we could somehow trade that, okay, this model can be considered as the first stable model, and this was this one that performed in a following way. So we can see that the first stable model had the word error rate around 26%. Which was really interesting and also promising and also surprising at the same time. So we were impressed that using a really small amount of annotated data, we were able at the very first stage achieve some word error rate drop around 20%. And in the next step, so we started to do some slight not fine-tuning, but hyperparameter search. So according to the available resources, we were able to do maybe 5 rounds of some search, and we found out that using approach or on changing the parameters in some good conditions or in the right way, we were further able to lower the error rate by another 5%. And finally, if we continue this some tuning of the parameters, we just realized and just tried that let's lower the number of iterations in the fine-tuning process from 12,000 to 4,000. We found out that this lowering approach helped to achieve even better models. So finally, we somehow stopped currently on this model that performs in a way that its word error rate is around 20%. So it's quite a good result. In parallel with these experiments, we have tried another approach, and we wanted to just evaluate one hypothesis and wanted to try some kind of multi-conditional training. So we, in some way, added a small sample of high-quality acoustic data to the fine-tuning training data set. So it was just really recorded aside in our building in a quiet room. I was one of the speakers, and it was just, I think, 30 minutes, so nothing special. We just wanted to try it, and we be curious that what is the reaction of the system to adding this data. And we were also surprised that this step doesn't or didn't help. So we just realized that, okay, there is no acoustic and language match because the acoustics was completely different, and also the language or the style was different from the style contained in the training set. So this was not a good step. Therefore, we selected this model as the best fine-tuned. Let's have another perspective to these results. So, okay, so we had this stable model with 18% of error rate, and we were curious that how this model is performing in some separate or split evaluation scenarios. So therefore, we did this experiment, and we divided or split the voices of the training set to separate set of operators and the customers. It's quite usual that we are doing this evaluation in such use cases. And personally, I was really surprised when I saw this number that we are somehow reaching the level of 10% of word error rate for this call center use case, of course, but for operators, not for general result. But I was really impressed that there is some trigger that we are maybe doing or going a good way, and there is still, I think, personally, place for improvement, for further improvement. On the side of voices of customers, of course, this word error rate, it's a bit higher, but still internally there is an opinion that the business still says that if there is a level of error rate of 20%, we can start to talk about some business perspective, and we can start think about some doing some analytics and so on. So I hope that we are reaching this level, because of course we want to mostly do the analytics on the side of customers, not the operators. Operators as well, but maybe we are looking for use cases where we want to know that what is the voice of the customer, what are the topics mentioned on daily basis, what are the claims, or what are the issues that customers have on daily basis. So this is the place where we want to really do some insights and so on. To have some real-world example, I prepared just a very quick comparison of real transcripts that are, of course, cleaned from some sensitive aspects. And sorry if you don't speak the Slovak, but I believe most of you, yes. So you can check the left side where we have the transcription done by the pre-trained Whisper model, and on the right side we have the transcription obtained by our fine-tuned model. And with the support of our annotators, I was able to mark with the red color the parts that were evaluated as incorrect ones. So you can see the difference. It's quite good example, I think. Okay, if we go to results back, so let's have another look of these results. We were also curious that how the different errors in the transcripts are distributed, and I was also surprised from this result, where I saw that the reduction of deletions in the transcripts is achieved in or was lowered almost 5 times. So it was quite interesting finding in this result perspective. Okay, so let's have a last evaluation. So this is a picture of 2 histograms. The one with the dark green correspond to the baseline model. So this is a distribution of word error rates, and on the y-axis with frequency. And you can see that the pre-trained model or the transcripts that were somehow categorized to this histogram, we can observe that this error distribution or the peak of the distribution positively moved to the lower range of the maximum that is alternating around the range from 5 to 15% of order rate. So it's quite interesting how the error was lowered from this perspective. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude my presentation with a very short summary. So with all of these regards to the challenges that were mentioned in my presentation and also in the colleagues' presentation, we are really happy that our fine-tuning approach yielded almost 30% of error reduction. So it's a good and promising result, and therefore we would like to, in the near future, continue in this internal research and some kind of in-house development of a scalable speech-to-text model. I'd like to, at the end, mention some takeaways for you. I believe all of them are, or you are familiar with them from another maybe topics or from your daily work, but nevertheless, so I just wanted to emphasize that if you are doing such experiments or are you going to do such experiments, so it's a good to assess the quality of your output. So it's a good thing to have your own data, at least small. So it's worth thinking around annotating your data, at least a small sample, and you can very efficiently track your progress. And what we have learned that we don't need to expect perfect results because it's not really needed. It depends what you are willing to do with the transcripts, and if you want to maybe put this transcript to some LLM model or to do some analytics, so there is no need to have perfect accuracy. So there is no need to have 100% accuracy, and it's practically impossible even. And the last finding or lessons learned for us is that data matters more than the architecture of the model itself. So we were observing that when we were doing some changes on the front of the data compared to the architecture or the hyperparameter, it had bigger impact to the quality as playing around with the parameters. Okay, that's it. So let me say a big thanks to our team that we are such kind of technology supporters and enthusiasts. So we are not a standard team. We are not sitting together on daily basis, but we are working together, and our goal is very clear. So we would like to find finally a well-performing speech-to-text system that is somehow reusable and not intended just for the call center, but it is scalable and we can work with it for different use cases across the bank. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. It's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for coming, and all the best in your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for really deep, in-depth look behind the scenes in Tatra Banka. It was very, very informative. If you have any questions, as Peter mentioned, we will have time for them after our discussion, which will continue shortly after a really short intermission. So stay with us. In about 30 seconds, we are back. Welcome back. After our short intermission, I will just remind you that you can ask questions at Slido at #better_AI, and we already have some questions there, and we will get to them soon. But first, I will just introduce our guests who are from other banks, and we have a small innovation for today, and I hope it's we will not be jinxed on 13th, but we also have a hand microphone. So if you are here and you are not afraid to ask questions in person, then you can use the microphone and just pull out your hand. But this will be all after the first part of discussion. So let me welcome Martin Budaj from the National Bank of Slovakia.
Good evening.
We have Jakub Červeň from VUB banka.
Hi, everyone.
You already know Peter, and we have Martin Hurban from ČSOB also attending, and they are all AI people and data scientists, and they all have like first-hand practical experience with AI. I will just start with Martin Budaj because he's the regulator, and all the guys are more afraid of him. So you're responsible for innovations in National Bank of Slovakia. So how is actually a regulator getting ready for AI-based financial services? In Slovakia and elsewhere also, I assume that you cooperate on a European basis.
Yeah. So first, I must say one disclaimer. We are not a regulator in the sense of AI Act. So currently, no decision in Slovakia has been taken about this, who will be the regulator. Probably the National Bank in Slovakia, but for now, not. But as a regulator of financial sector, we are actually quite open to innovations. We have some platforms to foster innovations. We have Innovation Hub, where supervised entities or even startups who are not yet supervised can come to discuss some innovative ideas. And we can give them advice if, for example, it's in line with regulation or not. So it's useful for supervised entities to know if some novel ideas are compliant with regulation. So it helps, I think, to develop some innovative ideas in the sector. And from our side, we are also trying to keep pace, not to lag behind. And we are also using AI or other innovations in our activities, either for our internal purposes or to supervise industry better, or communicate with other regulators. So maybe for the beginning.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. When you have questions about regulation and AI, Martin is the person to ask questions to. So don't remember that. I have a question for Jakub. He's the senior data analyst and AI engineer in VUB. And when we talked together, you mentioned that you are, just like Peter said, you are using like your own internal data centers and everything. You are not using cloud. So I wanted to ask, why did you opt for in-house hosting? And what types of companies would you recommend it to? Because I assume it's not that cheap to actually operate your own data-intensive servers.
I think the simple answer is we had GPUs. There was not like a big plan, let's build it. We could. And the advice I would give, I think, as you said, the infrastructure is easy. It's the people who take care of the infrastructure.
Okay.
But for us, it's a huge enabler, right? So the biggest use case we have is called Shepkar, Whisper. We use the Whisper model, not the fine-tuned one, and we use LLM, right? And I assume similar to Tatra Banka, we have a lot of calls, and the price of that is really high. So we are really glad we don't have to pay Microsoft,
Oh, of course, yeah. And is it also because of the data protection? I mean, Peter mentioned that that it's a really sensitive data, especially the voice is. I mean, it's biometric.
Yeah, for us, we have a lot of use cases that wouldn't be very easy to do in cloud. So when you go to compliance, and the first question is it in cloud? We say in the cloud. We say no. It's enabler for a lot of the use cases, especially in like audit, risk, legal. All this stuff is really hard to push to cloud.
Oh yeah. I understand. You have much less lawyers to contend with. Yeah, it's a good choice.
It's always nice.
Martin Horban is a science team leader in ČSOB, and you mentioned when we talked together that you are experimenting with the use of AI with employees first. So can you tell us what is the adoption rate and how are people actually approaching in this in the bank?
Yeah. We are also trying to onboard like multiple colleagues to start using generative AI, for example, in their work. We are experimenting with multiple tools. We are trying Microsoft Copilot, which can help you organize documents with Office stack. We are trying also some other tools for voice transcription meetings, and so on, which are openly accessible on the market, and try to put them in the production. And we are looking how people interact with them, and it's not always very clean and clear how to show them how to use it more very effectively, and so on. So we did a lot of large-scale experiments on our colleagues and their adoption rate of these generative AI tools. So,
okay, and who was like the most, let's say, open to adopting AI tools?
Yeah, generally, anybody who is very keen is okay. If you try to push some of these generative AI tools on some parts, even though there is nice use case and they can use it and it's very useful, it will not work. Yeah, the people must have it in their spirit. They want to be innovative. They want to try new things, and then they are using it out of the box.
Oh yeah. I see. So let's say the first movers or the pioneers, right? Okay, I wanted to ask you all, where do you see the most promising or highest, let's call it highest value added uses of AI? I mean, especially in the financial sector. I mean, we've already heard about the call center services. So where do you see like the most, let's say, the adoption? Perhaps also in the internal tools, as you mentioned.
Maybe I can take that. So I think maybe if Lukáš Palaj was here from Slovenská sporiteľňa. I think that's a big topic they're working on. It's hyper-personalization. And I think, when I try to explain it to someone, I think the offer you get from a bank shouldn't be, somebody calls you and, oh, do you want a credit card? You should get a message that's specific to you, and it should be like, okay, last month you've been to Vienna airport. Imagine you could go to the lounge if you buy our, credit card, and it's free. I think that's when you find the true value, where you can sell better and sell specific products that people actually want. Not only look at, okay, we want to make 20% more revenue, but it's like, how can we serve the client or customer better? I think that's the biggest value it can bring.
Yeah.
Maybe I can continue. So I see there two maybe dimensions. The first one is something like optimization of internal processes. So using these tools, if they are correctly assessed, we can achieve some cost saving or process optimization and so on. So in the case of call center speech recognition, so it's not for the people, it's not really obvious that what you are doing or what is your goal. So okay, so you transcribe the speech to text and what to do with them. But of course the text is the input for some subsequent analytics where we can get insights and maybe optimize the processes for the customers to have better customer experience and maybe better experience in general. And the second dimension is maybe on the level of the people, employees. So we are, we have some goal that we would like to people to get familiar with these AI tools, and we have a goal that these tools maybe should or could be a native part of daily bread and butter maybe work. So we are trying to do some events and education events and hands-on sessions where we invite people from different segments of the bank, and we have this goal to somehow spread this nice topic and have discussions and achieve that people will like to use this tool and maybe optimize their daily work to have maybe more efficient work and so on.
Martin, you mentioned that you, for example, train the LLMs with the internal documents so that people can search it better.
Yes, we are also looking in this direction, but it's relatively novel, like these racks. They are on stand for some times, but still not many productionized cases, where also like is another area where this AI or all this stuff can be used, and it's put in the production is, for example, also on behalf of regulator, it's like in anti-money laundering, where it really improves the capability of looking in the financial crimes and so on. So, and for example, in this area, there is also compliance and regulator is more allowed to use even higher amount of data and various types for this purpose to be sure that none of your clients is money launderer, so you can detect them. And in the combination with that you are filtering these leads for your investigators, you can very much do the job.
Martin, do you have some experience with the AI tools? I mean, I'm not asking you about the business, business case, because you're not really a business. You're more of a, national bank, but still, I assume that you are experimenting with AI a lot.
Actually, we have some business cases, but maybe I will continue on this AML. So we frequently also see in supervised entities that AI is used for fraud detection, for example, or biometry is used to remotely onboard new clients, so to verify their liveliness and so that it's not any fraud in this. Regarding us, we have actually many cases where AI is very useful for our business. One of our core tasks is supervision of financial market, and I can mention one use case. It's the detection of unlicensed offering of services. It's very frequent that you see an advertisement that somebody offers you a good investment, a high return rate, very good conditions, but it's not a licensed company, and usually it shows up that it's some kind of scam. But it's not easy to find all such cases, and we usually know about it only when people come to us complaining that we have invested something and lost our investment. So we would like, and we have currently one project running that tries to identify such advertisements, and language models is used to distinguish between advertisement, maybe a newspaper article mentioning investments, but in completely different context. So it needs to understand what's going on and give us some notifications. Look here, and maybe this is something illicit. So one of the cases for us.
Yeah, this is nice because the scammers are actually using AI to actually generate those kind of ads. So it's nice that AI is hunting AI.
Exactly.
Maybe in 5 years we will just have 5 AIs here.
Yeah.
So did you encounter any unforeseen consequences when employing AI? I mean, Peter, for example, mentioned like an interesting example, like when you introduced like the high quality audio, that it actually, distuned the model, let's call it like that. So did you encounter any such consequences when you tried to do AI at your job?
I think the biggest thing we kind of, I don't say disregarded, but like underestimated, is the customer education. Like here in this room, I think all of us can write the decent prompts, but somebody working in a branch, like they don't understand, how to write like a good prompt. And oftentimes, especially where you do like RAG use cases, for instance, you can make better documents, you can improve your search, get better LLM, but sometimes like if you have a perfect prompt, it's going to hit the document and it's going to be perfect answer. And I think this is like a thing that all of us have to get better. And I hope we will get better.
Okay, Martin, you wanted to?
Sometimes, well, it's interesting that sometimes the problem is if the model is too good. So if it's perfect. For example, in insurance, if it takes all your data, medical records, and really can customize or personalize health insurance for you, then we find out that many people will simply be unable to get insured because the risk would be too high for them. So there needs to be some kind of solidarity, and you simply cannot use the models up to their maximum, because otherwise you would run out of the business and also wouldn't be able to provide real services. So sometimes too good model is not very good.
Okay, yeah, that's correct, actually. I was covering insurance for 20 years, so I fully remembered like these talks every time, some new regulation came up. Yeah.
Maybe another example, so unforeseen consequences, yeah, but in a good manner. So it's experience from yesterday and back to the people and the education. So we can see some advocates that or the colleagues that are almost keen on writing such prompts, and they had never heard before that, and they are telling us that, okay, so I created some my prompt repository, and I have prompt for that, and I'm using it regularly. So it's great to see that interest in this new form of area. Wow. And maybe another example exactly from this use case, and I haven't mentioned it because of the scope of the presentation, but we are used to the fact that the generative models can somehow hallucinate or generate some non-useful sequences, and this is the feature also for the Whisper model, and we were surprised, and there is also some recent article about that Whisper model hallucinates. In some healthcare industry, there is a system that transcribe some papers and so on, some documentation, and it looks in practice like that you have some transcription, and it's followed by repeated sequence that okay, ďakujem, or ďakujem za pozornosť. There is even not said. So we were surprised that some recordings had extremely high word error rate. So we were looking for the reason, and okay, what's happening there? And actually, there is no recipe to eliminate that. There is some forum or some recommendations. So we have tried some of them. They are partially helping, but not completely eliminating. So we just realized that need to pay attention also to the outputs, not just do the evaluation in the experiments and report the numbers, but look at the outputs that what you are obtaining. So it's very surprising. That was really unforeseen consequence.
Yeah. Martin, do you have any such examples?
Even when we are introducing, for example, this Microsoft Copilot to our stakeholders and management, and it was doing like meeting transcription. Somehow in the meeting transcription there was this Nazi here, Nazi there, and it's really dangerous too if you do not check what's in this meeting summary is generated. Like,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, this is really nice. I have one question before we move to the questions from our listeners and audience, and it's let's not take it as a confrontation, but how does regulation actually complicate your job? I mean, that's the usual or standard way of of mentioning. Do you have anything that you have to take care of because of the regulation? I mean, you mentioned that nice thing is that if you have your internal servers, then you don't need to care that much about compliance with lawyers and everything.
Maybe for us, we have like internal AI community with over like 90 members. And the nice thing is the compliance person is in the AI community.
Oh, yeah.
So if there's an issue, are we doing like I don't say like a foggy use case, but something that could be, like problematic, we talk to them and they say yes or no. So I think the approach is direct, and then all 3-4 of us are part of like a bigger group, and there's some regulation there, and we'll have to, I don't want to say fight it, but deal with it. And I think I see right now that as more problematic for us.
Yeah, this is nice. Any problems in your cases?
It's very similar, and it's, of course, as we are a bank, we are working with customer data, sensitive data, so we need to pay attention and be really, really careful. And if we are in the stage of such POCs or some experiments, maybe it's a little bit simpler because we are in the internal infrastructure, but when it comes to some products, taking the prototype to some production level, so of course there are some strict steps or a process that we need to follow. And that's completely right. But yeah, from some perspective, it can be viewed as a limitation or some thing that can slower the process. But it needs to be done. So
yeah,
it's a nature thing.
Martin, I mean, what's your take? You look like very forthcoming, towards the innovation. So.
Well, we are in the same position, actually, because regulation applies also to us, so we have to comply as well. But I want to say that, well, usually there is a good reason why there is a regulation, and in AI regulation, also, even if it's not optimal, the AI Act, it's quite reasonable, this classification of different risks associated with models, and so some of the models are really prohibited. I think it's a good idea to have this classification and to adapt the measures related to different levels of risks associated. So I think it's better than having no regulation or than having really something like prescriptive regulation.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, I see. Okay, let's move on to your questions. So let's start from the very top. We have a question actually for Martin Tamajka. Maybe he can. Yeah. So we will just leave this one maybe for later, and we have this one for Peter. Peter, how do you cope with the numbers like 66 in one model and the Slovak version in fine-tuned one? Is it possible to correctly compare performance of these models?
Yeah, so the fact is that if you take these pre-trained models, they are trained in the way that if you start dictating or put some recordings with such content to them, you mostly are obtaining numerical forms, because there is the setting that you get these 66 at the output. And I hasn't mentioned that in our annotation convention we are used to transcribe the numerical information to the orthographical forms. So it's for some reasons, and of course there is some no coherence between these two forms, but we are doing some kind of post-processing of the text or hypothesis that we are getting from the pre-trained Whisper models, and we really try to align the information. But of course there is some possible level of or interval of maybe error that still should need to be or needs to be somehow counted or cleaned, because of course there are some scripts that are converting or working with this post-processing, but they are not ideal. So yes, it's still there room for improvement.
Thank you. We have Martin here, so I think he can use the hand microphone. What are the trade-offs of your approach to fine-tuning compared to simply translating text into English followed by application of existing LLM models? Yeah, you can come to us so that people can see you as well.
Okay, so it's working. So usually when you use a language model, and this is quite a valid approach that was used quite extensively in the past. So usually the simple answer is that the accuracy and the performance will be lower, because, and there is a simple reason for that. Even in the translation, you will introduce some error, especially if the text is not something trivial, not a common language, if it has, for instance, a specific vocabulary. So you will introduce the error even before the translated text enters the LLM, and the LLM can potentially extend this error, so it can be propagated much more. And also, you need to take care of two models instead of one, which means that you need to take care of the versioning, deployment, and all the stuff around it. So it is much more convenient to have just one model that can do it all.
Okay, thank you. Martin, if you could stay with us here, just in case that we have other questions as well.
Maybe if I can add to that.
Yeah.
So we have one of the use cases, and the big reason for that is because the risk guys, they make like models, and the regulators are very mad if they put the text into Google Translate. So we basically decided, what if we can translate, like Italian document to Slovak or English? And when we try to translate models, what we found, the LLMs are way better at translating those texts. So even current day open source LLMs are way better in translating than some, Google Translate, whatever it might be. I think even if you go to Google Cloud and you look at their translate service for documents, the best one they offer is using their LLM.
Yeah. It's actually, yeah, it's my experience as well. When you need to translate something into, especially like more common languages such as Portuguese, you can use LLMs like very, very efficiently, even for the speakers. Okay, let's go to another questions. This one is for Peter again. Are you pre-processing the sound with, for example, noise reduction, etc., prior to feeding it to the AI model?
Yeah, the simple answer is not yet, but of course we are thinking around that. It's on our list or in backlog. But maybe just to mention quickly a previous experience, but not in the category of whisper-like models. So once we were somehow manipulating the spectrum of the recordings, it was somehow impacting the performance in a wrong way. But if we try to apply the same algorithm to the training data and add this sample back to the training, it was performing quite good. So it was kind of, yeah, if we introduced this behavior of this algorithm back to the training, it was performing well. But not just that I use some noise reduction on the recording that I'm going to transcribe. Yeah. But we want to try, of course, such approach. So there is a lot of degree or freedom of degree what you can do in such setup on the front of recordings, on the front of architecture, and so on. So it's a lot of things you can do, but.
Juraj, do you have like comparable experience because you're working with Whisper?
I wanted to jump in, but I didn't want to jump in all the time. So we actually tried it, but not for the training part, but for the inference. And what we found, basically the best noise reduction software that I can find, they are using neural nets. So it's AI as well. And it basically doesn't increase the performance, at least in inference stage, quite, like it's no difference essentially. Okay. Like maybe if you have a really, really bad call, somebody's, chopping wood, is in a car and a plane is crashing, then yeah, it's going to work way better, but that's like you're fixing 1% and maybe degrading other 99%.
Yeah. Let's call this like very extreme situation, you know, especially with the plane crash. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Can you both, and I think this means Peter and Martin, can you both share if you did any considerations about safety of the outputs of the fine-tuned models?
Safety. I mentioned these hallucinations. That was some observation, and of course we are looking at the output. So it needs to be assessed that what we are getting from the system, and of course, especially in these AI or generative models. So considerations, analysis and assessment of the outputs is the answer.
Yeah, Martin?
Yes, we did the consideration as well on multiple levels. So first of all, when we are talking about the safety of the input data, like there are some ideas that we can, for instance, collect some proprietary and potentially private data and train the model, and then just release the model and not the data. But this has quite some considerations. Like, as many of you know, you can, in certain situations, get the training data out of the model. So this is one level where we consider the safety of the outputs of the models. And then, again, hallucinations, like you mentioned, this is another big consideration. But there is maybe one trick how to at least try to reduce it. One of them is RAG. RAG was also used as a technique to reduce hallucinations. And another one is the chain of thought. And we have the reference also from the industry, even from a bank, that the chain of thought helps to reduce the hallucination quite a lot. So it also contributes somehow to the safety or reliability of the outputs. It's just more computationally expensive.
Okay, thank you. We have a question again for Peter, but I want to enlarge it to others as well. The question is actually mentioning whether you have tried obtaining data from easily available sources such as radio transcripts and etc., and then artificially distorting the sound to resemble vocals, which is basically like generative AI, you know. So I wanted to move from this question to also whether you are using some sort of generative AI to augment the data sets, for example, because when we started talking, you know, the Slovakia is like a really restricted data set. So let's start with the question first, and then let's move to the generative AI data. or generated data, synthetic?
Okay, sorry, the first question.
The question was whether you try to use also some other sources for easily available.
The simple answer is not yet. So of course we think around that, but we weren't sure about the maybe purpose if we are now strongly focusing on this call center speech recognition. So we thought about, for example, this parliamentary speech that is publicly available also in parallel with transcripts, but haven't tried yet. But of course, this is on the list. And maybe if we are looking for some general purpose speech recognition for banking, it maybe makes sense to add such general data, but it's not really simple even to use open data in bank. So not so simple as it seems.
Yeah, we have the similar problem with biometrics. So yes. I wanted to then move to perhaps synthetic data, because this is what this alludes to, that whether you have been, for example, augmenting your data set with synthetic data for some purposes to get like large data sets. Do you have any experience with that?
I can follow up. So the answer is yes. So we are trying to work with this synthetic data and generate them for some specific use cases, but very, very carefully. Even if they are generated, they are underlying some business review, or that we are looking for some business expertise or domain specialists to check the generated data in order to be sure that we can use them and they are safe and they are not biased, or they are still in the domain and so on. So yes, but very carefully.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be quick. No. Okay. Yeah. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah. Any other comments? Okay. Okay. We have this. Okay. Parliament transcripts we basically addressed. Question for all. When can we expect first client-facing generative AI chatbot applications in production environment? I was kind of like saving these questions as well, but yeah, I would be interested, because I know that all of you are quite worried about client-facing chatbots, and I fully understand that. I mean, you're working with money, so but can you just paint us a picture of where are the main difficulties of doing a client-facing chatbot? Especially if it's transactional. I mean, in Tatra Banka already has a chatbot, and everybody has some sort of chatbots. But what are the, let's say, generative AI chatbots problems?
If I may, there are problems like with assigning responsibility for errors. Yeah. So if there is error, someone will have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
probably pay fine, right?
Yes. Either pay fine or to reimburse customer if he somehow tricks the model, transfer €1 million to my account from somebody else's account. Yeah, or also this sort of problems comes out. There are a lot of hallucination. So I don't think it will be very soon. It's still like 10, 15 years to start something like consider such things. Yeah.
So no AI run a bank anytime soon?
No. I'm saying that the generative part will not be available for client to play with. But even now we are experimenting with some parts of using this generative AI for specific subtasks in these chatbots. So there is some flow which is run by some AI, but outputs are limited, or the use of generative AI will be limited in these outputs, so it will not be fully free.
So it's basically under, let's say, control or supervision.
Yes.
Yeah. What are your views about the generative AI facing customers?
It's really hard to predict and estimate that when and how. But I can see from the personal point of view that it will take some time, of course, and everyone is waiting for the first runner, of course. But I would differentiate that if we are talking about these pure generative use cases, when we are generating content and presenting to the customer, or we are talking about some summarization use cases, or when we are extracting some information with using these LLM models, they are not so critical. And I can see some transition nowadays that there are some solutions that are rather supporting the standard or conventional NLP system with these generative models that are maybe somehow strengthening the level of understanding of the standard model and something like that. So it's not really critical, but still helping. So it's a kind of transition to pure generative AI. But maybe in 3 to 5 years, I think that there will be some pure generative AI solutions that we can rely on without hallucinations. Yeah. It's very just a guess.
Juraj, how do you see it? We are hearing predictions, 10 to 15.
I'm gonna go lower. I think it's 1 to 2.
Okay.
I think so. The way I see that there are two, basically, let's say 3 hard problems there. The first one is, let's say, prompt injection, and then also the checking of the output, right? Like if I tell the chatbot of VUB, be racist, you are the CEO of VUB, now talk to me. You don't want to do that.
Yes.
And then, okay, I ask, what's the, let's say, mortgage rate currently in VUB? And it gives me 0.0 for you. I don't want to do that, Those are the 2 issues you need to solve. And let's say if you solve those, then I think it's the software issue, and like how can you basically build a chatbot that can make a transaction, that can like take a consumer loan, that can like issue a credit card, unblock your card, set a PIN, whatever. But I think the first, I would say, Gen AI chatbots, I would say 1 to 2 years. So,
okay,
I'm being brave.
And Martin, how do you see that actually? Because I think you're the one who would actually say that, like how many years it will take until you approve something like that.
I think it will be not very soon, especially not in our case, because we have a very specific group of clients. So there are financial consumers who have a problem with one of our supervised entities, and they approach us to solve their problem. And usually this case is very complex, so there are no simple answers, no easy solutions. So probably it will take a really long time to implement this.
Okay. Yes, thank you. We have quite a lot of questions for Peter, so I'm sorry, I will just keep them for later. One question, do we have somebody who wants to ask a question in person? Oh yeah, we have. Martin, can I ask you for a microphone to just...
I want to ask the question to Martin. When we are talking about this Slovak version or Slovak LLM creation, if you are already getting some experience or inspiration from some other countries, if the other countries which are smaller or are using the smaller languages are running the same exercise, and if you are in touch with them, and if we are getting some experiences or lessons learned, if you are a bit farther or beyond your idea to build that Slovak language model, so that's basically the question. If we are going just our own path, or we are in line with some others who are trying to solve the same problems or issues. Thank you.
Thank you for the microphone passing. It's nice to cooperate here.
Yeah, so there is the middleware. Yes, so other countries, like for instance, the closest one, Czech Republic, is solving exactly the same issue. And I can mention one example that it's not a research institute, it's actually a company, Seznam CZ. They are building their own model. Also, it is a fine-tuned version of the model. Basically, they are solving the same issue. So we have some contacts there. We are not coordinating with them right now or with any partner, I would say. But we are definitely taking some inspiration. And one of the examples is, I mentioned in the presentation, the benchmark, which is a huge part, actually, of the Slovak LLM initiative. And quite recently, the Czech colleagues released their own Czech benchmark because they were addressing more or less the same issue. So we are taking the inspiration also from the Czech benchmark because it's very well built. And we have some ideas how to extend it, some ideas that are not covered by the Czech benchmark. So yeah, the general response is we are not coordinating with anyone, as far as I know. I would be surprised. But we are taking the inspiration from them. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. And I will do one last question because we have like 3 questions for Peter, and they can be solved by email as well. So sorry for this, but you had Peter's email there, so you can just check for details. And I wanted to ask the 2 Martins because they mentioned it. Can you be more specific on how to use or how can be used AI in AML? AML is of course the Anti-Money Laundering Act. So how do you actually use it? Because you mentioned it.
So for currently, what we are using, and it's already in production, is there is a large amount of client data and his transactional history, which is being processed on a daily basis and predicted whether specific transactions are connected to some money laundering case. And then these tasks are assigned to some investigator, and he goes over these tasks. Currently, we are also trying to employ generative AI in this process. Because we have to file very concrete reports about what was the scheme and what the crime was committed, and file it to National Bank. So we are also trying to generate these reports using generative AI with some pre-filled so on, and our investigators will save some time for writing these relatively long documents, which can be up to 2 pages long for each finding.
Yeah, nice. What's your experience?
In other words, it's about finding unusual transactions. And what's unusual really depends on many factors. So sometimes it's easy to define like a rule-based system to detect what's unusual, but it's not enough frequently. And here's the place for not generative AI, but for machine learning techniques to process structured data about transactions.
Okay, thank you very much. We are actually running out of time, so thank you for staying with us, especially thanks to the 3 Martins that were with us answering questions, and also Jakub and Peter. So I'm very glad that you had the time to come and answer the questions. If you have any more, don't hesitate to write us at batterymeetup.com or our speakers, and we'll see you some other time. This time it will not be the 13th, or maybe it will be sometimes the 13th, we will see, but we will see you sometime next year. Thank you and good night.